A movie is a kinetic art. It has to do with movement more than anything else. And what you're doing is trying to get a frame of reference of the movement. And you can't do that unless you actually have moving images that you've edited and cut together and made into a sequence that works dramatically. And action!
Well, the evolution of the pod race was a major event for us because we all sat down, all the artists, our production designer, George, and he started to outline the basic scale of the whole pod race. First of all, it was going to be 10 minutes long. We had no way of knowing how we were going to shoot this. We set out with a preliminary scout of trying to figure out how we were going to shoot this stuff. But the relationship between the images that he was coming up with and the sheer velocity and speed of how fast these pods would go, we had no idea how we were going to actually achieve it.
Oh, this is going to be messy. Me not watching.
So in a case like the pod race hangar, we shot a number of the full-size pod racer engines and cockpits in a stage in Leavesden. And we needed to later extend that set another 150 feet. And so we built a miniature, an 8th scale miniature, which we dressed with some of the same engines where we needed to replace them or add to the whole number of pod racers that were evident in that hangar. We shot people that would walk around in the background, and we had to then make this miniature match the actual reality. Then we had to make a three-dimensional version of that in the computer to be able to place synthetic characters. Jar Jar had to walk convincingly on the sand as he walked forward in that, or the pit droids had to dart behind some of the vehicles and racers in the background. So all three techniques were utilized in the pod race hangar, both computer graphics, miniature models, full-size set on against a blue screen.
Most movies you can look at a rough cut and it's pretty much there and it's not going to change much. This movie doesn't even exist until it's finished because it's a fantasy and because it doesn't exist anywhere else. It needs that seamless quality to make you believe in what's going on. And one of the most powerful factors is the soundtrack. The sound effects to make everything believable and make it real and tangible like it actually exists. And the other is the music to give you the emotional cues and the strength that it needs to propel it along.
Despite the advances in technology and the fact that the film may be digital or on film, the fact remains that the task of the sound designer is simply to select the right sound at the right time, because hearing is believing.
People don't realize how much of the sound is manufactured from scratch. Every detail of the soundtrack has to be thought of, has to be recorded. The dialogue, the sound effects, the music, all these many sounds are brought from the earliest point on to become the film that we know.
You know, a lot of people think Foley is just footsteps and movement. And over the years it's evolved and it's become so much more than that. The scope of it is so huge. And I guess what we like to think of is that it's all in the details. If somebody is doing even, you know, the smallest sound to the largest sound, Foley will cover. And I think, in my opinion, the hardest thing to make a sound for is something that's really quiet.
Many sounds are created from everyday objects. For instance, if you take an electric razor and a salad bowl and run the razor around inside the salad bowl, you get a wonderful resonance of a sound, which, when processed a little bit in the computer, became the sound for the entire battle droid army coming over the mountain.
So Bulba was a unique character because he was completely digital. So what he said could be changed up into the very last minute. You're not constrained to having a live action performance where, regardless of how good you think the performance is, it has to fit in the lips of the character. So sometimes we would just let the actor go and do something really outrageous, and then we'd reanimate his lips. And we could try out all kinds of different takes because we had the fact that the digital system could handle, take after take and multiple performances, and they could all be cut right there on the stage to see what was going to work the best.
Scrawny dough pot, Slimo.
Most of the sound effects originate from real sounds that are in the environment around me. For example, I decided to make the sound of the biggest monster in the film from the smallest and cutest person I knew, which was my 4-month-old daughter, Emma. And she had a very interesting, cute little cry. It had a little bit of a growl to it. So I recorded it, ran it through the computer, made it as deep and as cosmic as possible, and put it in an echo chamber, and then created the sound for the underwater sea monster.
George and Rick have really reinvented filmmaking. The traditional linear process of pre-production, production, and post-production might not have been, certainly for a film like this, the most efficient process. It's the most logical one, an easy one to deal with, and possibly the most historically successful. But the creative process wants to mix things up a little bit more. And the animatics have helped George and Rick to totally reinvent the filmmaking process and turn it into a completely non-linear process.